What if I told you that Brad Pitt and George Clooney made a huge movie together and nobody's ever heard of it? And there are dozens more just like it. And I'm not talking about small movies. I'm talking about a movie that cost $200 million or more, with two of the biggest movie stars of their generation on screen together for the first time in years. And you probably didn't know it existed. Well, that movie is called Wolves, and it came out in 2024. It's on Apple TV Plus right now, and unless you specifically went looking for it or happened to scroll past it at just the right exact moment, there is a real chance you've never even heard of that film and countless others just like it. But think about that for a second. Brad Pitt, George Clooney, together, $200 million plus budget, no opening weekend to argue about, no trailer you couldn't escape for months, no endless talk on YouTube from everyone who covers movies, no Friday night where everyone could go experience it together and then talk about it on Monday morning and back here on YouTube. Just a film that appeared on a menu one day and disappeared into oblivion the next. And there are a lot that are just like it. That's not an accident. That's not bad luck. That's a symptom of something much larger that has been a problem with American cinema for the past 15 plus years. And tonight we are going to talk about the $200 plus million raft of A-list slop movies that you've never heard of and why that is. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. All right, so before we even jump into this, I want to talk about movies for a second, because I want to establish something here that maybe the younger audiences tuning in never really experienced. And, that is that there was a time, not ancient history, not 50 years ago, not get off my lawn grandpa time. No, we're talking 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, when you could not have a major American film starring major American movie stars that everyone didn't know existed. Like everyone would know about those movies. It wasn't possible back then. So if Arnold Schwarzenegger had a film coming out, you knew about it. You'd see the trailer, you'd see it for months in advance, you'd see movie posters promoting it ahead of time at the video rental store, everywhere you would go. People would talk about it at school, you'd talk about it at the dinner table. By the time it got here, everyone was aware of its existence. Same with Sylvester Stallone, same with Tom Cruise, same with Eddie Murphy, Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson, Julia Roberts. The movie star system worked because movies were public shared events. They existed in shared physical spaces like theaters, video rental stores, and television eventually, yes. But everyone passed through these things simultaneously, and there was a limited amount of options that could distract you. The culture had a shared calendar. Opening weekend on that calendar mattered. Whether you planned to see the movie or not, you were going to hear about it and people knew about it. You didn't have to be a film fan to know that Terminator 2 was coming out. You just literally had to exist on Earth, at least in America. You just had to exist and you knew about that film. But that infrastructure is completely gone now. And what replaced it is an infinite sort of private menu that a person navigates alone, served by an algorithm that shows each person different things based on their individual history. So it's very hard to discover or hear about things that you didn't know about unless you were looking for them. That cannot produce the same cultural result. No matter how much money is spent on the film inside of it, it just cannot duplicate it. The proof is in this list, and I'm going to show you. All right, so let's start right there with 2024's Wolves. Brad Pitt and George Clooney, $200 million plus budget. It doesn't get bigger than that. And it was on Apple TV Plus. And the film is fine. I kind of turned it off halfway through. I wasn't really interested. It's about two fixers who are hired to handle the same problem and end up having to work together. The chemistry with Brad Pitt and George Clooney is there. They have been working together all these years, and it shows on screen that 30 plus years of friendship. If this was 1995, 1997, 2001, this would have been the absolute biggest summer movie, the biggest film on the planet, winning, uncontested, people going in droves to the theater, two of the most famous actors of their generation, a tight premise, getting to see them banter back and forth. But instead, it got dropped on Apple TV in September of 2024 and generated basically no cultural conversation whatsoever. No debate on the weekend, no discussion anywhere online, no sense that this was something that everyone was excited about or getting ready to see. And I want to be clear that the streaming model isn't the only reason that this happened. There's something else that we're going to come back to later, so just put a pin in that. But when this film is living exclusively in a private menu that you have to find, seek out, or be recommended to, and not in shared culture, shared public spaces like the theater, even here on YouTube, any of that, it cannot generate the sort of all cultural pressure to go see the thing. It doesn't generate any excitement. It's not an unmissable movie. It's just another piece of content. Now we can go back to the one that is supposed to be the most successful on this list. It's 2021's Red Notice. And this isn't really a list, but these movies are all ones that I wanted to talk about. Well, Red Notice was also in excess of $200 million on budget. And it starred Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Gal Gadot, and Ryan Reynolds. And look, Netflix claimed this was their most watched movie by their own internal numbers, though Netflix declines to share what those numbers really mean in terms of genuine viewership. But here is the thing about Red Notice that perfectly illustrates the specific problem with the streaming model. Everyone who watched this movie watched it pretty much alone or with one person or somebody in their house in the privacy of their own home. It never had a shared experience. Nobody debated whether or not to go see it. Nobody waited to see reviews or hear reviews. It just existed one day all of a sudden on Netflix in a menu, and people either clicked it or they didn't click it. And I watched it. It's serviceable. Mostly thanks to Ryan Reynolds just being goofy Ryan Reynolds. That's about what you get there. You're watching Deadpool in another movie. But here's the question that reveals everything. Can you tell me what Red Notice is about? With any kind of details, without looking it up. Can you describe the plot? Can you quote a line or two from it? For most people who watched it, that answer is a resounding no, you cannot. And that difference between a film that becomes a cultural touchstone that is remembered and celebrated and talked about 40 plus years later, like Indiana Jones or Back to the Future or Star Wars or Rocky, etc., these films just die on the vine. They become nothing but more content to offer you up. Slop. It's not like Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is about something. Indiana Jones is about something. You can describe them, you can quote them, argue about them, discuss them. Years later, Red Notice was consumed, and consumption without genuine connection is exactly what streaming produces. Then we have another one that I tried to get through. It's 2023's Ghosted. And this, you've got post-Avengers, Captain America, Chris Evans in this, and Ana de Armas, who is super hot right now as far as an actress. Two charismatic, popular performers, right? In a romantic action comedy, a genre that was reliably mainstream for a really long time, 30 plus years. You got stuff like True Lies, you got Romancing the Stone, on and on you could go. And then that kind of genre vanished completely. And the frustration of Ghosted is it represents a genre that still should work. It still should be given a chance. Romantic comedy, action film built around two hot people or whatever, two good-looking people with great chemistry is a great concept to start with. It's a proven concept to start with. It worked for decades. But now they don't even hardly make these films. And when they do, they get dropped here, despite a $200 million budget. But here's the thing I want to be like a little bit honest about, because it goes beyond the streaming model. The romantic comedy that worked, Romancing the Stone, True Lies, even The Mummy, you could say, worked because entertainment came first. The relationship was the engine of the story. The action existed to create situations that revealed character within those two, leads, and the advanced dynamic between the two leads. But modern Hollywood has developed a specific habit of engineering films around messaging rather than an entertaining story first. When a film's primary design goal is to make a specific statement about gender, identity, or social politics or dynamics, rather than to entertain you first, the story suffers. Characters then just sort of become like avatars, like vessels for arguments, for statements, rather than people that the audience wants to spend time with. And audiences are not stupid. Audiences can feel when they're being lectured to and having a finger wagged at them rather than entertained, and they stop showing up as a response. The streaming era, they do this because people can click for 5 minutes, and if they're not interested, they're out and they go on to something else. There's no commitment. There's no shared moment to go check this thing out. So if the message doesn't hit you and the AI slop doesn't excite you, or the bad CGI or bad writing constantly saying the plot over and over again, you can just click off. And guess what? Those movies just get clicked off into obscurity forever. And then you have another movie starring Matt Damon. Yes, about to come out in the Odyssey, and that's a whole other ball of wax right there. But Matt Damon and Casey Affleck, a film directed by Doug Liman, The Instigators. That's the same guy that did The Bourne Identity. But Matt Damon, who is normally a bankable star of the last 30 years or whatever it is, the film is about another heist. There's a lot of heist films. It's like they're trying to recreate Ocean's 11 a lot of times with these guys, but it's a heist film gone wrong, and nobody even knew it existed. Talk about going wrong. And when you have a $200 million budget or $150 million budget, this one's somewhere between those two, and you have Matt Damon and you have the director of The Bourne Identity, and you have Casey Affleck even, and nobody knows your movie exists, nobody talks about it, that is a problem. And I mean, listen, in 1997, Matt Damon came on as Good Will Hunting and Ben Affleck, and they became household names overnight. And since then, they have been part of the massive movie star machine. And that makes a movie like this that just disappears without any conversation, despite all the money in the world being thrown at it, even more shocking. When The Instigators was announced, released, and forgotten within just a week or two window, it generated no conversation at all. The infrastructure, the movie star infrastructure, the old Hollywood infrastructure of entertainment and certain release windows and a shared experience that made Matt Damon an unmissable, movie star that was completely bankable, has gone. They have killed it themselves with messaging and with streaming centered content and getting rid of old release windows that used to be a long run at the theater and then a blackout, and then it would be released at a video rental store. and then there would be a blackout, and then it would be released to buy on home video. Then there would be another waiting period, and it would be on premium TV like HBO, Cinemax, etc. And then a longer waiting period, and it would be on broadcast television. They had all these release windows, big name stars, excitement to build at each window. They got rid of all of it for messaging and to hurry up and get things on streaming to become content. And content, instead of entertaining movies, is exactly what they got. And that's exactly why people don't know these films exist. Then there are a couple of films that I want to mention because they're probably like two of the best that I've seen that in this, but they kind of are the exceptions that help prove the rule a little bit. The first one is The Tomorrow War, and it's a bit older, but this one had a $200 million plus budget too, starring Chris Pratt, who's the hottest actor on the planet at the time that they made this, and is still one of the highest paid actors out there. And it's a high concept sci-fi movie about people from today getting drafted into a war into the future. Super cool concept, badly done CGI for the most part, but a serviceable, entertaining enough film that would have been huge if it had been given the love and attention that it deserved, and a release at the theater, proper CGI, proper sets, all of those things were there. But somehow they still spent over $200 million on this and got none of those things. Then you have another Apple film, The Gorge, which got Anna Taylor-Joy, super popular right now. Miles Teller, super popular right now. This film started out strong. It had a good creepy concept to it, a mystery box kind of thing, like what's happening here? Two soldiers stationed on opposite sides of this gorge having to guard whatever is down inside of it. It had atmosphere. It had chemistry, sort of an original concept. And then the movie starts to require that you completely abandon all logic, common sense. It gets into sloppy looking visuals, and it just completely fizzles out hard. But it had a chance too, if it was under the old model. Both films illustrate the same larger problem. Even the best attempts at genuine entertainment in the streaming model struggle to actually produce a good product and generate a sustained cultural conversation because they just don't reach anyone. And the money doesn't really actually appear on screen because with this model, they have to pay the actors so much money up front because the actors have no shot at getting anything on the back end because insider numbers on streaming are impossible to regulate. So they don't get residuals. They don't get any other way to make a profit from the film. They don't get the physical media sales. They don't get any of that stuff. So they have to have huge overbloated salaries right at the front, which is just another problem with this model that causes these movies to just go into oblivion. Now, if you didn't think any of those actors were big enough to make my point, how about a couple of movies? I'm just going to talk about one, but there's a couple that star Tom Hanks on Apple. One of them is Finch from like 2021, 2022, and this is a Tom Hanks film. He is the focus. He is the star. He plays a man who survives a solar apocalypse by like living underground, and knowing he's dying, he builds a robot to care for his dog after he, like all this kind of weird high concept stuff, watching Tom Hanks be Tom Hanks, and nobody hardly knew it existed. He has other movies on there, something about the bus or Greyhound, but he has like two other films on there, both in excess of $150, $200 million budgets that nobody talks about. One of those, there were some internal numbers that suggested that there was less than 200,000 confirmed views. The same with Wolves. Now, that can't be verified because they don't actually put out their exact internal numbers. But this is a Tom Hanks movie that nobody talks about. And there's a couple of other Tom Hanks movies that nobody talks about, just like they didn't talk about the George Clooney and Brad Pitt film. That is an indictment alone of Hollywood and the streaming model as it stands right now. Whether you like this film or not, it's Tom Hanks. It used to would have been very popular to at least go see, even if it flopped. The same with a Clooney and Pitt film. It is absolutely crazy. There's no way that you couldn't know in 1994 that Forrest Gump was coming out, and Tom Hanks wasn't even really the Tom Hanks we know yet. He was more known as a comedy actor at that time, from Bachelor Party, Splash, Turner and Hooch, The Burbs, and then he did Forrest Gump. But you still knew that film was coming. It was Tom Hanks, Robert Zemeckis. Now these films just vanish, and they're so badly made as a general rule that it makes it worse. And I want to talk about what happened as like sort of a cultural complete diagnosis here, because this isn't just a list of films for me to tell you about and complain about and move on. 3 things happened, in my opinion, simultaneously over the last 15, 20 years, usually right around 2008 is when this all fell apart. First, the streaming model eliminated the shared public spaces. We talked about it. The theater, the video store, the network television premiere, the paid cable television premiere. They were all shared physical and cultural spaces that everyone went through. They created unavoidable awareness of these films. Also, because competition was so high, you had to create things that were genuinely good. You had to invest in front of the camera, right? You couldn't just say, hey, it's just this star and it carries it. It still had to look good. It still couldn't be, overly CGI'd slop. It couldn't be obviously fake locations. None of that. It had to have real entertainment, real craft to it. And then people would be knocking down the door to get to it. Streaming changed that and made it all a menu in a private space. They didn't have to really hear back about how bad the film looked so much. It didn't matter, because all they needed was to get enough clicks on it to justify its existence and say, hey, we're offering you a Tom Hanks or a George Clooney, Brad Pitt movie on here as part of our content if you subscribe. And that sort of helped destroy films. Second, the algorithm. It goes into that. It replaced our shared cultural experience and calendar. No more opening weekends for big movies like this with big movie stars. Whether you cared about those movies or not, you knew they existed. And now you don't. I talk about movies. I make movies. I have this channel about movies. And I was shocked to discover that some of these movies existed. And that is absolutely crazy, because now everyone gets their own calendar. Streaming services are doing who knows what with all this money, because it sure doesn't look like it's on screen. Obviously, they're having to pay the actors more up front because of the reasons I said. But holy smokes, most of these films look really bad. They look like content that's just being generated for you to passively click on, find, say, hey, it's a big star movie and we're offering it to you, and that's it. They don't care about the quality. They don't care about the entertainment. They just care about offering content to get you to click on here or there enough to make you value the subscription and stay subscribed. And that is a huge, huge problem, because it's content over quality. Now, the last one is the one that makes me genuinely angry. Like, as a filmmaker who has spent my entire career believing that the power of movies, the power of art, the power of pop culture is that it unites people. It gives us a common ground. The industry has spent the last 15 or 20 years, however, making films for messaging or agenda discourse rather than audiences. Now look, I don't care what side of a message that you lie on. I have said on this channel consistently that messaging of any kind above entertainment, above the story, is death to a movie. It's death to pop culture. It's death to something that will unite us. It can't exist first. Now, there's always been messaging in movies, but the movies were so entertaining and it was so in the background. You could see it, not see it, glean it from there if you wanted to, or you could watch it on the surface. Now, that's not the case, because essentially the last 15 plus years, there has been one side dominant messaging in this. That's just factually accurate, y'all. Like, you can go and really objectively look. There is a certain agenda. There is from one side that has been dominantly pushed in the films, and the films are suffering for it. Theaters are suffering for it because people are tired of messaging. They're tired of progressive messaging that just says the same thing. The problem is never necessarily your values. The problem is priority, right? When the message comes before the story, when the agenda and messaging becomes the forefront above entertainment, the story suffers, the entertainment goes away, and the audience notice and they go away. And in this time period, we are losing theaters. Movie theaters are losing money. They can't stay afloat. People are not going to the theaters. People are not buying movies anymore because they are absolutely tired of it. The films that defined generations, that defined shared cultural moments, Ghostbusters, Die Hard, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jurassic Park, The Matrix, all of these kind of films, they were built on the belief that if you told a genuinely great story that was filled with compelling characters and everyone in the room would get involved, they would feel it simultaneously, regardless of their background, regardless of their identity, regardless of their beliefs. And that was correct. It was a proven formula. The films that are still loved by everyone who saw them and they're still talked about, they're talked about across every demographic that existed. Not one side or the other, not one certain people or another. The films that are being made now are being made to push the discourse or beliefs of the filmmaker and the popular Hollywood machine that still exists at large. There is no connection between the larger audience that are like, hey, we don't want that. Like when you get something like Project Hail Mary that doesn't have that, it sets records, comes out of nowhere because people are starving. That audience never went away. They just stopped being fed. These movies cannot become cultural moments because the division in the architecture of the films is so baked in, it's so forefront that people can't get past it because you cannot unite an audience around a film that is designed to make part of that audience specifically uncomfortable and specifically the villain. You've alienated at least half of your audience at that point. Now, Steven Spielberg, he's guilty of this. He is my favorite director of all time. I have always said that. But guess what? He was guilty of this with his most recent movie, Disclosure Day, when he goes out in front of everyone and says, this film is going to make Christians question their faith. Not going to make people question their faith because Christianity is not the only faith-based religion in this world. It was specifically Christians, of which there are billions on the planet. And whether or not you agree with him, whether or not you're Christian or not, the one thing you have to admit is that that declaration, coming out and saying that specifically, well, that is designed to be against some people and for other people. It is immediately a declaration that is divisive. It is meant to divide and attack a certain group of people instead of bringing people together. He never said that with Jurassic Park. Because that movie was pure entertainment and it had all kinds of ethical questions, but that was never said. It was never targeted as an attack on one people, one faith, or another. Why is it just Christianity that would have to question if there were aliens? It could question, any faith could question then because it doesn't go again. It doesn't align with any of that. But no, it was specifically singled out. So now that movie is immediately dividing people on messaging right from the gate. And then you have Supergirl, Millie Alcock, who's going to play Supergirl in this movie that's destined to flop. Looks nothing like any Supergirl or any kind of thing that we would associate with Superman or Supergirl and those characters of Truth, Justice, the American Way, Wholesome, all of that. She comes out and says, if I'm making white Christian dads angry, then I'm doing the right thing. Again, whether you're a white Christian dad or not, that is not an invitation to a shared experience. That is a declaration of intended division and a declaration of intentional insult to anger one specific group. And it always tends to be the same specific group that is the victim of this, right? Despite the fact that that specific group is the audience for most of these movies and they buy the most movie tickets across the world, it's very odd that that's who you're attacking. But the films that I grew up loving, they didn't come out with those announcements. They came with trailers that made everyone excited to see the movie simultaneously. They came with opening weekends that the entire country participated in together. They came with specific understanding that the cinema's highest function is to put people in a room together and make them feel the same thing at the same moment, thereby unifying people, connecting people, bringing people together, showing that we have a commonality. And now they're destroying that. That understanding is so important because cinema is by its nature a communal and unifying experience, just like pop culture. And it has been replaced by the understanding that cinema is a platform for certain cultural and social arguments against other people that might have different social or cultural arguments. So instead of leaving those differences at the door and being united, these films are being used to attack and divide. And that cannot work. And because cultural arguments, no matter how important you might think they are, cannot do what a great story does. It cannot unify people. And cultural arguments are forever going to change. So they're going to leave these films extremely dated, very badly. They're not going to be able to stand the test of time the way something like Raiders of the Lost Ark can, the way something like Jaws or Star Wars can, because they are intentionally divisive. And that will never unify people now, and certainly not across the decades to come. The Brad Pitts, the George Clooney's, the Tom Hankses, they're still there. The Rock, all these stars are still there. Arnold Schwarzenegger is about to redo a bunch of sequels for his most famous movies. They're still there. The money and the audience hasn't left. What has left is the idea that entertaining everyone and bringing them together and having a commonality simultaneously is what is worth doing. That is what is gone. And the $200 million plus invisible A-list slop movies are exactly what that departure looks like. So you can take hundreds of millions of dollars. You can take the biggest stars of live, films that everyone in a previous era would have been watching as shared cultural events, and then they're just gone because of messaging, because of streaming, because of bad filmmaking, and they don't even make a ripple. Go watch one of these movies. You'll see for yourself if you can find it, and then come back to the comments and let me know. Let me know which one of these shocked you. Let me know some other ones that you just stumbled on and were shocked to be like, how did I never hear about that movie? I want to hear from you because I guarantee the list is much longer than I put here. I couldn't even get to them all. But if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, hype it up. That really helps out the channel. And if you want to help support what we're doing here more, my Patreon link is always in the description. You'll get 4K reviews, behind the scenes looks at my filmmaking, special members only videos, past live streams, so much more, and everything helps out the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.